welcome back to the Succeed Against the Odds podcast. We've had a long hiatus, but I am back with an extremely special guest today, my dear friend, Tina. I say D'Amelio, but how do you say it?
No, that's good. D'Amelio.
D'Amelio.
Yeah.
Tina, I've known you for, I don't want to say how many years, but it's been a long time since we've known each other. It's been a few decades for sure.
At least
a couple.
22, a little over 22, I think.
Yeah.
23.
And when I first met you, you were a drama teacher back then.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I was.
Yeah, but now many years have gone by.
Yes, that's right.
And life goes on, and we get into different directions. And now you are a counselor.
Yes. So we've known each other longer because I've been a counselor for over 24 years now. So, yeah.
So that's what I kind of saying.
Yeah, I know. We don't want to think about it because then we're old, right? Yeah.
Okay, so Tina, my first question to you is, first of all, I'm really excited about what you're doing. But my first question to you is, what inspired you to go from being a drama teacher was in school, right? Was it high school?
It was a high school. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
What inspired you to make that transition into counseling?
Well, it directly related to the job, actually. When you are a drama teacher, especially because I was the only drama teacher in a school of like a couple thousand of kids, you really start dealing with emotion. And I came into a situation where this young man was extremely troubled. And he actually did a scene, and it was his first week in drama class, and he decided to play an abusive man, and it was so real that I knew that wasn't just acting, and I went, what the heck do I do with this? And that's when I went, I need to get more training to figure out if this happens again, that I'm better equipped to be able to deal with that situation at the time. And that continued to come up. So when I started my Master's of Counseling, it wasn't necessarily because I thought I was going to become a counselor. It was because I wanted to have better tools to deal with things coming up through emotion, how to deal with people when they got to that place and didn't know where to go, or not leaving them traumatized when they were leaving the room. And that's how it started.
So once you started getting into the training, then did you start noticing more and more patterns across other students, or?
You started to pick up the smaller things you might have missed. Like, you always knew as a teacher different things that were coming up, but you started to pick up little things, or the questions you started to ask were different. And so then you went, okay, I can see this going in a different place. And then I started to be more attracted to that part of the work than just doing classroom work. I wanted to dig deeper. I wanted to go deeper into that. And then adult people started to come into my life too. I became more connected to families. And then I became more interested in doing adult work, like working with adults.
Yeah, I know you do a lot of that now with one-on-one and with groups as well.
Yes.
But just to get more of the background here still, when you were working as a counselor in the school, I think you're still
You're
still doing that.
I still am.
Okay, so my question is, what have you noticed to be a pattern? Like, what is, maybe a better question is, what do you find to be the most common issue?
Without a doubt, anxiety.
Anxiety.
It has, I want to say quadrupled. I don't have the research like right on my hands. We know it's been super problematic. I mean, one of the reasons we just now have the provincial cell phone bans in schools is because of the mental health. And a lot of that relates to the bullying, the backlash, the mental illness, particularly when we're dealing with girls and all the sites they get on. And I'm not good enough. I'm not, I'm not going to make it. That continual downward slide, and the amount of students that have difficulty coming to school, don't want to come to school, can't get to class, can't get out the door sometimes. That's the biggest one for sure.
So that's what's causing the anxiety.
It's not the only thing for sure. Our world's pretty complicated now. The environment is pretty complicated. We're in new territory because we don't have the background to look at. You can't just go to a job and be in it forever anymore. There's very few professions that are like that anymore. And it's also COVID. We cannot COVID did a lot of damage to mental health, and we cannot negate what that is, and we really have to concentrate on that part as well.
So when you say COVID, was it the isolation part?
Isolation had huge amounts, and too much in the rooms and too much on screens, and then not having the social ability to learn all the nuances. There's big gaps now because they didn't have that, right?
Yeah. So I would imagine that would have affected the younger generation more than the adults. I just see myself, my personal experience was, it didn't really affect me personally very much. But I can see how it would for someone who's extremely social and in youth. And
the one thing it did with adults, though, and it transferred to some of the children, is the fear. So you were lucky to come out like that. A lot of people have a lot of fear, and they started to react from a fear-based perspective, and that got passed to their children because it not purposefully, but it just did. And so there's still a large number of adults who have a fear-based living that they never used to have.
Was it fear of the pandemic never ending, or fear of catching it?
There was a lot of fear, especially if you were immune compromised, that you would be either really compromised or die. There's also the fear that your life isn't going to be the same ever again. There are a lot of people who financially did really well in COVID, but there are a lot of people that it really harmed them.
Yeah.
And they're not dug out of that yet. Yeah. So there's the fear of, what if this happens again, then what? And that, of course, especially for kids in that situation, if their parents lost their businesses or lost their work or got behind by 2 years financially, that puts a big stress on a family, right? So it's not one thing. Yeah. Right.
Well, let's hope for no more pandemics.
Yes, let's hope for no more.
We're the path to healing now.
Yes, that's right. And just knowing more. We know, like, we as North Americans had never been through that before. So we know more. We know to ask more questions now. We know to go, wait a minute. And I think too, and I'm not sure, I don't think it was purposeful, but the government did set us up to be in fear, right? If you're going, or you could catch us if you could. But I that might be that they just didn't know any better, but I think we have the ability to ask a lot more questions now.
Yeah, I think I would have hated to be a leader of any country under those circumstances, because I don't know if anybody was actually really prepared, and how do you deal with it? Like, whatever you do, you're going to be criticized, and people are still going to get hurt no matter what.
We definitely weren't prepared. That was obvious. We saw that, right? So,
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to the healing part.
Yes.
How do we move forward from fear? How do we overcome fear? How do we, when we're talking about the fear of like, for example, the fear, like I said, COVID didn't affect me as far as the social, as I spend most of my time home anyway, and I work from home. But I always knew in my mind that everything was temporary. We just didn't know how long. But it always felt temporary. And I think that just having that knowledge of, it's not going to be like this forever. Things are going to get better. I don't believe we're going to wear masks for the rest of our lives. I never felt that way. I kind of feel that maybe that helped. Just kind of look forward. I know it's just temporary. It's just a stepping stone. We'll be okay. But what about those people who obviously didn't feel that way? They felt they were stuck there, or afraid of the finances, the uncertainty of it all. What's one tip that you could give people who may still feel that way?
So it's multifaceted. I would say from like just a wellness point of view, one of the big things to concentrate on is, believe it or not, breath work and breathing through, and because getting your system to settle down so you don't jump to all of those worst case scenarios, and breathing through it and counting. And it sounds very trivial, but it's actually, there's so much research based on breath work and what it does for healing. But it depends too on how deep this goes, right? And then it's maybe journaling. That would be another one. Maybe getting into nature, huge. We know that we've been really disconnected from the earth for a long time, and getting back into nature, being in the woods, going to the ocean, going to places that can calm you and calm your system down. Those are simple ones, but they work. And then it's, how deep is this fear for you? Is it hurting how you're existing now? So then is it counseling work? Is it challenging that fear, right? So whenever you're looking at fear or anxiety, you always go to fact versus fiction. So is the fact, oh, that if I don't wear masks still, I could probably die. And if you look at the research and the facts, that's actually not true. So it is challenging yourself to pay attention to the facts. And when your brain starts to go into that fiction, that spinning, that fear base, then you're going, well, okay, it's not true. And we know now lots of people are getting COVID. It's like the flu. They're not dying. It is a thing. But I still have a population that still wears their masks. Now, part of that is to cover up their emotions. But even I was on the SkyTrain last night, lots of people in masks. So it's still there, right? But it's telling yourself to look at the facts and look how you can keep yourself safe and still live comfortably. If you need to do that, but not all the time. We know wearing a mask all the time isn't healthy. So.
Yeah. Well, I read somewhere a while back that 85% of what we fear never happens.
And that's very true. So it's looking at fact. But when you're dealing with people that have actually been in very fearful situations, like I have students who've come from war-torn countries, parents, like a lot of Ukrainian people. So now they have lived in what shouldn't have happened, right? And that fear was huge. So then how can we start to make ourselves as safe as possible in our new journeys and starting over again, right? Mm-hmm. And relying on the resources we have to live good lives, right?
Yeah. So fear and trauma, where is the connection?
Oh, well, if you have trauma, which most people do, you have fear. If you've been through trauma, fear is there. Yeah. The triggers are there. It is working through that in order to live a successful life. And I want to make it clear, it's not re-traumatizing yourself by going back in the past to relive all of those situations. It's more about, I'm getting triggered. What can I do with that? This has happened. What can I tell myself? Again, let's go back to fact. What are the strategies that work for me that I need to do to calm myself down, to work through whatever I've been through? So it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And I don't think your fear will never completely go away if you've had trauma, if especially significant trauma, but you can live a successful life by working through those things.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to. We have to.
We have to.
Right?
Yeah.
And so on that same topic, what would you say, or how would you advise someone to face the fear of facing their own trauma?
So if you don't face the trauma, and we know the research with this, there are really high chances you're going to get physically sick, right? Because we have to house it somewhere. And even if we deny it, hide it in a cupboard in ourselves, it will eventually come out in some way. If you do any reading by Gabor Mate, who's brilliant, he has the research to back all this up. So it is looking at, I would say, starting simply. Like if I have difficulty going out of the house, what can I do? That's a simple start for that. That makes it safer, daytime rather than nighttime. Going to somewhere that I'm knowing. The other thing with fear is once you start to tell your brain it's okay, and you practice it. So you're facing that practice, right? Allowing yourself to be vulnerable with the right people. And that's really key. Like making sure you're talking to the right people and not the people that are going to make it bigger or manipulate you. Or, unfortunately in this technical world, we have to be a lot more cautious about who we tell things to, so it doesn't get out there, because that can be super re-traumatizing, right? And cutting down on how much you put out on social media. Like people post far too much about their traumatic events or their things, and that is, you put yourself into an extremely vulnerable place when you do that, and you can get some very negative feedback that isn't helpful to your healing. So really keep that stuff off of social media. If you're going to do it to the people you trust, not out into the world. It's interesting how society's decided that we can just put it all out there and think it's going to be great and people will know how tough I've had it and people will be great, and that's actually not what happens a lot of the times, right?
Yeah. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, what do you think about people who are putting this stuff online where they are currently in that vulnerable state and sharing where they're at, their trauma. And I know that they're coming from a good place, or trying to reach out for help. But some people are I have seen some people use social media, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or TikTok, whatever, where, like you said, they start getting they use it as a diary, as a personal journal, and that shouldn't be.
Use your personal journal as a journal and your diary. Yeah. And don't put it out there. And if you're going to want to talk to somebody, there's some great organizations. There's people, even trusted friends. But, you're putting yourself in a really dangerous position when you do that. Also, too, we have people that don't do the right things, and they're looking for those exact people that are vulnerable, that they can manipulate, that they can draw in. And it's very hard to vet those people. Those people are craft masters at manipulating or harming people like that. Yeah. So you're putting yourself out there in a public way. You don't, and especially if you're in a difficult place, you have less ability to weed out who's negative. Yeah. Right.
And you know what? This is actually reminding me of, I belong to a lot of groups where there are people who need help and support and all that stuff. And so I had joined this particular group, and that was run by this man, whom I don't know. Yeah. And as I started noticing what he would post in responses, I realized that this man was manipulating the people in the group. Yeah. So when I called him out, he completely blocked me and kicked me out of the group. I was like, fine, but so I had no way of warning the other people in the group. I can't even find the group because I've been completely banned out of it. So that's very important to be aware of that, to not necessarily seek support from people you don't know. Right. But also, though, there is a flip side to that, which I think you may agree or may not. If you don't, please tell me. I think that at some point when we have healed from specific traumas, that it's almost, for me personally, I feel like it's almost our responsibility to share, now that we've healed specific areas, to feel free to talk about those things where you feel strong enough, so to let other people know that they're not alone if they're going through that.
Well, that's completely different, though. Right? You said something really key there. You've healed from it. Yeah. You're in a different place. Yeah. You're not in that place of vulnerability. And what you're doing is you're trying to inform. Yes. You're trying to educate. And that's always a positive. Yeah. And like you said, you started to notice that this man in this circumstance was manipulating, and you called him, and then you were out. That was very telling. But in your other state, you might not have been able to do that, right? Yeah. So when we're trying to educate people and inform them, that's completely different. You're not coming from the place of, I'm out here, I need help, this is happening to me. Yeah. You're coming from the place of, this has been my experience, this is what I went through, these are the organizations you can talk to, or these are the things that were helpful to me to get through it. And that's the positive of what's happened in our social world, because before, where people, especially if you live in really remote places where you don't have access to a lot of these things, that is really great, right? Yeah. I go back, way back. I was we're going way back, like at least 15 years, but we were at an LGBTQ conference, and the teachers, I was counseling at the time, but teachers and counselors were in one section and the students were in another. And there was a young man that had came down, spent his last pennies to come way from the north down to this conference, because he believed in his town he was the only LGBTQ youth, and he wasn't, but the only one maybe that was out, and he was facing a lot of bullying and a lot of mental health. And in fact, he had planned to not stay in this world until he came to this conference. And that, because he was able to even see it at that time on social media, that's how he was able to get down. And then when we found out he couldn't get home, everyone just it wasn't a huge amount of money, but everyone just threw in $5 and got him home. But now you wouldn't even have to travel down to do that. You would have been able to, those vetted groups that are safe and everything, to go in and get that help. So there's definitely a benefit to it. Absolutely. Right? And I think there's an empowerment when you've been through something and you've survived it and you've come through the other side, to let people know that it can happen. Because when you're in it, as you know, as we, you know, as anybody who's been through something super traumatic knows, you think there's not going to be a way out sometimes.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, that person lived what I lived and they got to the other side. So maybe I can too, if I do what they did, or listen to what, or there's a piece in there that go, oh, I'm going to try that. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's healing for the person who's been through it, because now you've given an opportunity to someone else to get them to the other side, right? As long as you don't try to take on a counseling role or something that you're not skilled in. Like that happens, right? Oh, I've been through this, so now I can counsel people. That no, you can't, right? And then that can do harm, right?
Yeah. Well, because we're all different. We have had different experiences, and some people have trauma from when they were younger. So there's so many layers.
And if you're not trained, right, you can't.
Yeah.
You can't do that work, right?
Yeah. Now, I know you've used different methods.
Yes.
I know that one of the methods that you have used is also working with horses, therapy with horses.
Yes.
Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, the horses, that's so funny how that came to me. My oldest daughter competitively jumped for about 5 years. So I'd spent 5 years going to a barn every week. And I liked horses, and she had this kinship with horses, still does. But I didn't really think much about it except for that. And then a big span of time went, and then COVID hit, and my youngest daughter, who suffers from anxiety, I saw that one of the horse barns was doing that work during COVID. So I decided to bring her there, and ended up meeting Lynn Mosley, who is now my leader at Riverhaven and the co-owner of Riverhaven. And we started talking about this work, and it was a different barn we were at. I was at Valley Therapeutic then, and they had already started the first responders program before I got there, which was helping out any first responders, because boy, during COVID, did they ever have a stressful time. And then we started talking about this anxiety and all the things people were facing, so we created the work. And then I started getting trained, deeper training, because I had the counseling, but I didn't have the horse piece. And now that's what I do. We work with groups. We work with, with the counseling piece, it's a lot of grief work. So we've done a lot of work with hospice. Horses are authentic. They're healers like I've never seen before. They have an ability to connect to people especially if people aren't good about talking, because horses, you don't need to talk necessarily. So we're doing a lot of work with hospice and grief. We've done a lot of work with corrections officers. So they're front of the line always, and just working through that. We've done some work with counselors who work with veterans. And we also do corporate work, like working with teams, how to communicate better, how to work better, and then the one-to-one counseling as well. And there's just a lot of ability to heal, because horses, there's no judgment with a horse. It's very authentic. I've had certainly circumstances where a horse knows they're not telling the truth. They'll be walking with them with the horse, and I'll ask them a question and they don't answer honestly, and the horse just dead stops, won't move. Why aren't they moving? I just think maybe you didn't tell me the truth when you answered that question. And when they do get there, the horse moves again, or they wrap around them to hug them. Or there's so many instances where there's such a value in equine work, and it fell into me. It was serendipity, and there's a healing. And this property I work on is so healing, just being on the property. You've been on the property, so you know what it looks like. Because it backs onto the dikes, the power of the water and the tides, and just the way the philosophy of the whole organization was set up.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if you've done this, so it's a question, it's a curious question. Well, all my questions are curious, but because of the drama background, do you ever use role play in the counseling?
All the time.
You do?
If the client wants to. Like, there are some clients, they won't do that. But yes, I do it. I do it everywhere I work, whether I've done it when I do my online counseling. Okay, you want to talk to this person about the situation? Let's play it through. I do it in my group work. I do it one-to-one. I've done it even with the horse. We're talking, and the person who doesn't want me seeing them, maybe they're on the other side of the horse, so they're brushing the horse, but we're role-playing through that. Yeah, so my drama background definitely has been very helpful.
Okay, so in all your years of counseling, can you share of a story, without giving the details, obviously, of a case where you helped someone and it was just a dramatic healing experience for them, something that really stands out that you can think of?
I think because there's a lot. Which one do you want? The one-to-one, the counseling,
You pick. Let's go one-to-one.
Okay, so I think I'm going to give two, because the horse piece, and then I'm going to give one without the horse, because not everybody can get to a horse, and some people are afraid of horses, and so it doesn't work for them. But one of them was a grief work, and the young woman, horses can absorb our emotions, so she had been very blocked with letting go of the grief, and the horse was able to remove a lot of that grief from her body. And I actually have a photo of her, with permission, leaning against the horse, and it had released her emotions, so she was in relief. And the horse, during that time, the body all rippled, because the horse was taking the emotion out of her through his body. And that's as an equine trained horse. Not all horses can do this. Horses that are equine horses are mature horses. They're calm. You can't do this with a young horse who's full of energy and doesn't want to stand still too long, that kind of thing. That would be one, because it happened like immediately. It wasn't.
So you could visually see.
You could visually see it.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah. I think another one-to-one was, because I really understand mental illness, having lived through that in my own family, the person had kept the illness, really, because there's still so much judgment, really quiet. And I had just asked a question because they had said something. And when I didn't get into big details about my personal story, but when I told them my personal story briefly, like, I understand this happened in my family, I think because they'd never talked about it, they didn't really go, oh my, it happened to you, but you're working here and you're a counselor, and yes, this happened to me. And so then it was a release of being able to move forward and not be so afraid to admit that this was going on in their own family, right? Mm-hmm.
Now, just for our audience sake, we just want everybody to know that you don't just work with horses, you also do the counseling online through Zoom.
I do online counseling through Zoom, yes.
Yeah.
There's not everybody can get to a counselor.
Yeah.
Right? Not everybody can. I mean, if depend. Okay, I'm going to use some single moms as a perfect example. It's very tough on them to try to fit in getting to a counselor on top of being a single parent. And if you're a single working parent, well, all parents are working, but you're working at a job and you're raising your children. So it really has opened that possibility up, that they can be at home. They don't have to get a babysitter. They don't have to get the kids out of the house. They can just do it at home. I also look at people that live really remotely, and they don't have an opportunity to, they're not going to drive 200 kilometers to a counselor. Also, if you live in a really small town, you may not want to go to someone you're walking past all the time, right? So there is a really, it offers an opportunity that we didn't have before. And, you know, I was just talking to someone that that does online counseling work, and this woman made a really good point. She said, I never realized, I didn't think I was going to like it, but I love the fact that, you know, I'm at home. She has a dog, so that's very therapeutic. But she said, you know, I could be in my own place. If the session ended and I still needed time, well, I could just, I'm off the camera, but I can write. I can have a cup of tea. I didn't have to physically walk out of a building after I'd been crying for half an hour and be worried that people were going to see me or put a hat on to cover my eyes. Or so, you know, there are real benefits if it works for you, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I do all of them, because I do in person, I do with horses, I do in person without a horse, and I do group work, and I do online.
Yeah, and I know you're amazing. I know you are amazing at what you do, because For our audience, in case they don't know, you've actually helped some of our Shimmy Mob participants
Yes.
in the past.
Yeah.
So I have witnessed it in first person or
Yeah.
from the sideline. I have
Yeah.
witnessed the power and the effectiveness of your work.
Thank you.
You're absolutely excellent, and that's why you're here.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's why I invited you. This was my idea to have
Yeah.
you here. And if there are, actually, we haven't really touched on this. You know, with my work with Shimmy Mob, one of the the biggest our cause is domestic violence.
Yes.
Creating the awareness around that, and creating awareness in a way that we want to help lower the statistics, to kind of empower people with the knowledge and understand this is the pattern that leads in that direction. Or if you are in this situation, there is help. You can get over this.
Right.
So,
and starting younger.
Because,
you know, I mean, I've been a counselor a long time with youth. I've counseled many youth that are in abusive relationships. And it's really, if we can get on that sooner, or their parent is, and realizing what can I do to empower myself. And they can't always leave home. They don't always have that option, right? But what can I do to empower myself or my parent that's in this situation?
yeah.
Because sometimes it happens, it's the child who, I've had that happen, where I've sat with a mom and a daughter, and the daughter asking the mom to go, like they need her to go.
To separate from from
the abuser.
Yeah. Yes, I know that. It's very common. I know it's very common because, as you know, I'm very exposed to that. I don't know if you've noticed, because I kind of put this online more so than in the streets, but I'm always saying you must leave your abuser. If you have kids, your kids are even the better reason for you to leave your abuser. You don't stay because of the kids. You must leave because of the kids. You need to you need to be the role model to set the standard that this is not okay, this is not acceptable, because by staying, you're teaching one or two things that, you normalize it. You're teaching that being a victim is okay, that it's acceptable to be disrespected and mistreated, or that it's okay to be an abusive person. And usually kids will tend to go one way or another if they don't have clear boundaries, if they don't understand what those boundaries are. I've had people tell me, I didn't know I was in an abusive relationship because I thought that was normal. I thought that's what everybody goes through.
Right.
Like, you know, my partner punching holes in the wall. I'm like, no, that's abuse. You know, just even, they don't have to punch you. That is still abuse. So what would you say to someone who's listening or watching right now who's stuck, who's completely stuck in that kind of situation, feeling that maybe they should stay because of the kids, but now they're hearing they shouldn't stay because of the kids, and they have no idea what to do?
So, you know, I don't want to negate a lot of, I think, well, as you know, the abuse has also been mental, right? So in other words, they have been disempowered. They have believed that they are not worthy of being able to go. That's part of what the abuser does, right? And also, we can't ignore the financial piece, especially here in British Columbia, where it's insanely expensive to live here. So I think it's finding, again, the organizations and the people to help you use the tools to gain your power, your inner power back. I think it is working with you and the kids, because I mean, with these children, depending on the situation, I always am making a safety plan. So if it's a violent home, it's what can we do to have you be safe? And we practice it. We practice it. Like, you lock yourself here. You've got your phone with you. If it's verbal, what can you do to remove yourself as best as you can from the situation? Because a lot of them will try to fight for that parent, and that puts them in a really dangerous position. It parentifies them, and that's not their role. And it's working with that parent to realize that that's not their role. And that really does extreme long-term damage. A lot of parents think, well, if I leave, we won't have this, we won't have that. But in time, you can have all of that, and none of it's worth what you went through. And you talk to any young person who, and because I've been a counselor for such a long time, I've had people come back to me at 40 years old, at this age, wish my mom would have left sooner. In some cases, a few dads, actually. I have some dads who are abused by their partners, right? Not nearly as many, but it's there. And that is even harder because it's so much harder for a man in this respect to step forward, because they're not in a world where there's lots of people that are similar to them that we know about, right? I won't say they have it hard. I'm just saying it's like we have the women who can.
I think men don't talk to each other about it
They
because of
don't.
the ego, right?
Yeah,
we women tend to
Yeah.
confide in each other and seek that support.
But and it's still embarrassing. You think if you're being abused, then there's obviously something wrong with you, and you're not very strong, and you're not this or that, right? So it's a courage to come forward and to recognize it. I worked with a woman several years ago now, and she really didn't understand, like you said, that it was abuse, because she wasn't being hit, and there wasn't being damage to the home, but the underlying piece was so abusive. And she came back to me a couple years later, and she said the first year was really difficult, but she goes, "Oh my gosh, thank you. I'm in such a better place, and so are my kids." Because her kids started getting into a lot of trouble, and that was just the outlet of, they were so disempowered in the home too, and they were angry, and they didn't know how to change it, right? Yeah.
So important to recognize. There's so much we could talk here for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
We could do many episodes on so many different aspects of all of it.
Yeah. I think having the courage to come forward and find a vetted person, a vetted group, someone that can lead you in a direction that's going to be safe. I think that would be the biggest thing, because once you know you don't stand alone, you get empowered, I think, in that. A lot of women think this is only me. They do, right? And certainly men think that. But women think that, and then they find out, and that's in all areas. You're struggling with depression or, more of the serious mental illness. I can't tell anybody, because we have the judgment. We have that piece for sure there. Yeah. Or, I'm suffering from anxiety is a big one, and I find out that the parent's been suffering from that for years. Well, it makes sense that the child is. Sometimes it's genetic. Sometimes it's just what happens, right? But it is coming forward and actually having the courage to say, I need help with this. I need my life to be different.
Yeah. And on that note, I want to make sure that anyone who is listening, if you are in that situation, one big safe thing to do is don't confront your abuser.
No.
Talk to a professional that can help you do this in a very safe way, because most of the time when you approach an abuser, it doesn't end well. It's dangerous.
It can be. The other thing that happens, I think, a lot is because abusers are smart, and they will then play into your mind, and it's going to change, or they'll do the opposite and cut you down. So you're not in a place of safety in any way in that circumstance. You really have to reach out. And there have been there's not a lot where it's that partner can do the work to get your relationship to a healthier place. And I'm going to think of, I've dealt with people that have been through war. So they are responding because they're traumatized. PTSD from the war. And so if that whole family gets that help, and they're working in that circumstance, because yes, when that person's in that state, they can be very violent. They're a lot of times not even aware because of what's happened to them. And so then you can get help as a whole family. And maybe you have to live apart for a while. And I know that's happened in the past with some of my clients. Or maybe you're living together, but there's different things. You have places to go when that person is in that state. so it's not safe for you to be there, but you have a relative or you have a close friend, hey, for 2 or 3 days, we're not going to be home because it's not safe for us to be. So that's in a situation where if you go for the help, then you can
But that person needs to want to.
That person has to want it. And if they don't want it, then there's no, you got to get out.
Yeah.
You got to get out.
Yeah. It's important also, though, to identify, and I'm not sure how that, I haven't dealt with this personally, but how, I think it's very important to identify the difference between someone who says that will get help that really means that they really want to get help versus someone says, I will get help, I will go to counseling only as a means to get back into the relationship and then continue that
Two
cycle.
things. Action speaks louder than words. Yeah. And you have to have a really good counselor who can spot that in a second.
Yeah.
And know, or not in a second, but through some sessions. In the end, if it's the same, you can't stay, right? And we need to do more as a society to not make it so difficult financially to leave. Right?
Yeah. I think for many cases, it is financial. That's probably the number one reason.
Yeah. But you can't, like, in the clients that I have had leave, and I can think of people that have moved from a house to a 2-bedroom apartment and they're sleeping in the living room because they want some normalcy for their kids. In the end, not in the beginning, but in the end, they're so glad they did it. And they can see a future. This is going to be this for right now, and I'm going to be in this 2-bedroom apartment even though there's 3 or 4 of us. But this doesn't have to be forever because now I can do the things I need to do to get to the next place.
Well, I know that when I left my first abusive relationship, in my mind, I'd rather sleep under a bridge with my kid than one more day under the safety of a home and a roof. To me, the mental was so much more important. I value that way more.
So you have to understand that it's hard sometimes when you're in it to see it, but when you're out and you go, oh, like I would say to people, what's it like for you to come home and you're not walking on eggshells anymore? You're not going, I better not say this, or oh boy, that happened, or I dropped something and now we're gonna have, what's it like? And you know, in the beginning stages, you drop something in the panic, like let's say they reacted to something breaking, all of a sudden it's a dish, big deal, or the milk got spilled. Oh, there's no trauma here. And then working through to normalize that, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say the journey's easy. It's not, but the benefits down the road,
it's worth it.
Are worth it.
It's worth it.
And finding that trusted anyone. You don't have to know them, right? Especially if you're going to an organization. But don't throw that out there online unless you're throwing out online. Does anyone know a place I could go without giving your personal details?
Yeah.
Because your personal details make you really vulnerable to the wrong people.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so happy you came. I'm so happy is there anything before we go? Is there anything you want to leave our audience with?
Well, I've known Francesca for a long time and been with her through this journey of these relationships. It's possible for it to change because it has for her. And now she is loved and valued and honored the way she should have been from day one. But also the work you're doing and the awareness. And that is just, I'm grateful you're here in this world helping people in that way. I would step back and let you know it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
You don't have to. Like, you get so clouded that there's no way out. There is a way out.
Yeah, and not doing the job, not doing the work. Is actually, like you said earlier, even if it's just at an emotional level, even if it's just that little bit under, the undermining bit by bit, it will affect your health. It is physical abuse.
Totally.
In the end, it is physical abuse.
Anything that you keep away and hidden away in your body, and you can Google this, and it will come up with research coming out of the walls. Like, it's a lot. But if you're going to read somebody really good, read Gabor Mate, because he really is a guru, and he's here in British Columbia. But he also, we
have a global audience. So.
Yeah, he's internationally known as well. Is illness will come.
Yeah.
It's, you know, with anxiety, I will say, anxiety untreated, and that doesn't necessarily mean with medication, but counseling, whatever way you're going to do it, anxiety untreated leads to depression 100% of the time.
Yeah.
If you leave it, and it may be 30 years, but that's what will occur. So really taking the courage to go, I need help with this. And you may not know what it is, but it can open all those doors up, right, for life to be different.
Yeah. So if someone wants to get in touch with you,
Yes.
what's the best way?
So the best way, well, I'll give you some information that you can post after.
Okay.
I'm on LinkedIn. You can directly contact me because your site is vetted, so I know it's safe. And also through those two places, LinkedIn, registered clinical counselors, and those are the two best places to get a hold of me. And
Yeah.
I'll let you post that.
And you're a counselor at a federal level, correct?
Yes, I'm a registered clinical counselor. So if you do have coverage, you will get covered because of that. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Tina, thank you so much.
Thank you,
It's
Francesca.
awesome to have you.
Being here with you is always good, no matter what we do. Yeah.
Okay, so hopefully you have gotten a few tips here and some insights for yourself or for someone you may know. Until next time, bye for now.
Bye-bye.
The most powerful lesson you've learned by working with people. And
Oh, gosh. Power lesson I've learned about working with people.
or specific, or let's just say with anxiety.
Oh, with anxiety, you have to address it. You will get sick.
Yeah.
Absolutely 100%. You will get sick.
Guess
And
it
your
really-
life will become less and less ability to live it authentically, without a doubt. That's for sure. The lesson for, you know what? Being vulnerable, having the ability to ask for help.
Yeah.
I came from a European home where you didn't ever ask for that, right? And I'm strong, and I don't think I need to ask. I mean, my own recent illness was part due to my surgeries, but the other part was due to the stress of what was going on in my life and not going, I need to stop and take a break because I need to keep working. So the self-care is really important.
Yeah. Right.